Hello. Welcome to In Time, a music history podcast. I'm your host, Zachary Singer. This is our first YouTube video here in the home studio. It's not much right now, but it will be something soon. If you're listening to this podcast, you can always find us now on YouTube as well as your regular podcasting services. Check us out because we'll be able to actually show you the things we're talking about, pictures, musicians, all that fun stuff. And they'll probably go in a graphic over here, or something. When Susan's here, we'll have to do something else with the camera, but that's something else entirely. I wanted to take a couple of minutes today to talk with all of you of the idea of being a cultural custodian. This comes from an interview that I had done with Chris Munce of the Choralosophy Podcast a couple of weeks ago. And I wanted to just take some time here as we're wrapping up our summer season on the podcast to kind of talk about that in a little more detail than what I was able to with Chris. Before we begin, though, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button on your podcasting service or on your YouTube page. It's right here. It's right down here. Hit it. Like, subscribe. It's a new channel, and it's going to be growing. We're going to be getting some stuff coming up, some YouTube-specific material, some adaptations of some old shows coming up, as well as the video recordings of our new shows for upcoming summer season. So be sure to hit that like, subscribe, and get those notifications so that you're able to catch up with us in real time. Likewise, head on over to our social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at InTimePod. Like and subscribe there, and leave us some comments. Get in touch with us. We love to hear from you guys. And while you're at it, finally, head on over to intimepod.com where you'll find detailed show notes for this and every other episode of the podcast, as well as a donate page where you can donate $1, $5, $10, or $20 to the show to help us improve our infrastructure. Every little bit helps to get you the quality show that you deserve. Now, on with the show. As I was saying earlier, I got to speak with Chris Munce of the Choralosophy Podcast a little while ago, and what I was talking with him about was this idea of being a cultural custodian, specifically within the context of education, but really it extends beyond that. Being a cultural custodian is something that we all do, whether we know it or not. And rather than rehashing the talk that I had with him, I felt that we could dive deep into what that actually means for all of us here on the show and in the world. First off, let's define what I mean by cultural custodian, though. Because normally, whenever you think of a custodian, you think of someone who's pushing a mop and broom around a room, making sure that a space is in workable condition for tomorrow's day of business. And while that works in the corporate space or in the educational space, really, this is something that we are all a part of. Got my script down here. To some degree, to be a cultural custodian is really just to partake in the culture itself. There isn't a number that you can call for someone just to show up and take care of your culture. This is something that we are all responsible for. And another way we could phrase it is being a steward of culture, to take care of what it is that we've inherited from the generation before us. Because at the end of the day, if we can't take care and tend to what we've been given, we can't pass anything on. Even our new creations become rootless and groundless after a while if we don't take care of what's come before us. And I do recognize that to some degree that this could be just another form of tyranny of the dead. I recognize that because it is a form of tradition. And tradition is such a stodgy word that we don't like using anymore. However, in order for us to assume this role of being a cultural custodian or being a steward of what we have here, we have to uphold a tradition, but it's deeper than that. There's an emotional core here that isn't present in anything else that's just done by rote, like just straight tradition. And it's really easy for us to do this. It's really easy for us to slide into this role because all you have to do is find something that you love and teach it, preach it, do whatever it is that you need to do in order to ensure that someone else picks up on your deep feelings about a certain subject. And it can be anything. It doesn't have to be just music, art, or anything like the theater. Like, none of the traditional things are restricted. It can be sports. It can be current pop music. It can be modern art. It can be anything that you want it to be, but you have to ensure that you found that thing first before we can do anything else. You have to find something that is sacred to you. And that is a word that we don't like so much anymore in our society because of the religious connotations. But you have to find something to keep sacred. Because at the end of the day, whether you're religious or not, we all have that concept deeply ingrained into where we are in life. And I understand the hesitation. I do. But once you've chosen that thing that you find to be most sacred, in order to become an advocate for it, you have to find its inherent beauty. Now, for those of us who are in education here, that, or even arts performance, that's something we've done on a subconscious level. We don't really dwell too much on those kind of things anymore. We did at one point in time, and now we do it as part of our daily life. But for those of us who are not a part of the education or the performance realm, the question is, how do you do this? How do you learn to take something to heart and then extol those virtues for everyone else? I also understand that in our current culture, the prevailing attitude that we have in our society is to really let something live, like live and let live to a certain degree, or live and let die to another degree. Thanks, Paul McCartney, for that ever-loving line. But in order to find new and better ways of doing things, we have often just taken what came before us and thrown it out there, thrown it into the garbage can of history or whatever you want to call it. And this is a mistake in a lot of ways. Because if you don't love what came before whatever it is that you're interested in, and I'm using love here as more of a agape sense of word, or you don't have to be in love with it. You don't have to like eat, sleep, and breathe, Robert Johnson or Mozart if you like, Jared James Nichols or John Cage. You don't have to be in love with those things, but you have to understand what gave birth to them. And that's where we get into a little bit of trouble, because especially in this day and age, we've gotten into the cultural habit of really just kind of stepping on just about everything that is old because of the connotations of the time period. So consider this my blanket statement against Nazism, fascism, bigotry, slavery, cultural homogeny that's enforced by the culture itself, etc., etc., etc. All those things are bad. I wish I didn't have to preface this with that, but we do. And that's because we've become poor cultural stewards as a society. But we can change that. We can fix that really easily just by finding something that we love and understanding why it is we love it. In the last 50 or 60 years, our big cultural push has been towards irreverency. You can see it in humor, you see it in drama and television, especially in television, because that's our main medium of entertainment still, even though, this could incorporate all streaming services right now. I wish I could have a list right here. Just all of these things are now gearing towards irreverence. And that's fine. It is. There's nothing wrong with being irreverent every now and then, because if you can't poke fun at something, if you can't enjoy making fun of something in a lighthearted manner, then really you're just kind of, you got something stuck up your behind there. But it has caused us to have a problem in the way that we relate things, because with each successive generation of irreverency, we have in fact become more and more mean-spirited. And that is a problem, because the giants of the past still have something that they can teach us today. And you don't have to look at them like they're some kind of monster because they came from a different time period than the one that we live in right now, and their values as a society, as an individual, were different. Especially because in 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years, someone will look back at you today and do the same thing to your life's work. And this is an inherent problem, because anyone can tear something down. But it takes a cultural custodian to ensure that what came before us is still available to those after us, because otherwise it will be lost and we will be left wondering what it is we are as a people. And this is where the classics come in. Now, this isn't my place to give you any recommendations, although if you have any suggestions for people that you'd like them to know, or you think that I should look into something here, send us an email at endtimepod@gmail.com so that way we can have this discussion. As long as it's in good faith, I'm willing to have it. I'm also willing to admit that I might be wrong in these instances, but I don't think that I am. Because just because something is old, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have inherent value. We still love our grandparents, right? Even if they live in a home and we only get to see them once every, 3-5 months or so, we still love our grandparents. And they are as much people as we are. And I wish I didn't have to say that, but, I teach high school. I have to remind my students that every so often. But what the classics provide us is an entry point, not just to the human psyche, but to the understanding of the people that lived at the time that they were created, of what they valued, of what they think was worthwhile for us to teach them, or for them to teach us, for them to teach their world, and by pure happenstance, it's lived till now. The question is, though, how do you enter into this world? How do you penetrate something that is old in a way that you can make meaningful for yourself today? Obviously, the easiest place to enter into the world of the classics is in literature, because you can read it. It allows you to build a world in your mind in a way that, say, music might take a little while for, or, an ancient Greek tragedy, even if you're watching it on stage. If you don't understand certain aspects of that world that was creating it, it's going to be a little harder to understand than if you're just creating this world from whole cloth in your mind. But you can also, if you're not a big reader, if you're not into that particular aspect, you can still get into the minds of the people that came before us by listening to their music. But how? The easiest thing you can do is ask, how does this make me feel? If you feel nothing, then maybe that piece just isn't for you. But for just about all of us, there will be something that these pieces leave us. It's just a matter of sitting there and identifying what it is. So you ask yourself questions like, what does this mean? What does this make me feel? Can I see the fingerprints of the composer? Or if you're looking at art, can I see the brushstrokes of the painter? Can I see the human element to this piece of history? Because they were once as alive as I am today. They were once as alive as the future generation will be, as you are today. Find one thing that speaks to you. And once you found that one thing, expand on it. Ask yourself, how does this interact? How does this corner of the painting inform what's happening over on this side? How does this little musical motif, this little, let's say, da-da-da-da, how does that grow throughout the entire first movement of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony? How does it pose a question that you then have to answer, musically speaking? By breaking something down like this, you're going to be able to take advantage of your own higher processing skills, which you can then turn around into identifying the emotions that are beneath it. Or if you're someone that deals more in emotion than you do in just raw processing power, how does the emotion inform what you think? It works both ways, and we kind of forget that sometimes. This is a skill, and it's worth developing. But at this point, some of you might be thinking, wait a minute, that sounds like mindfulness training. Well, it is. In fact, there's more to it. It's meditation. It's an active participation on your part. Sure, there's nothing wrong with just turning on, let's say a Mozart symphony and just letting it play in the background, or a little Vivaldi while you drink your wine and have your steak with dinner. There's nothing wrong with that. But we do have to spend time identifying what it is within a piece of music or a piece of theater or literature that is speaking to us in real time. Because that is what brings the connection between us as people, across time, across space. And maybe it's just the distance between you and your neighbor, or you and your spouse or significant other, or you and your child. These works live as we do. And the more time you spend with them, the more they live. It is a wonderful, transformative process to participate in the creation of art, because every time it plays, it's created anew, even if it's a recording. Because you are not the same person today as you were yesterday, which is why you should always return to these things every so often. And ask yourself, how has my position changed since the last time I encountered this? If you can't think of anyone that you'd want to share this question with, go online. There are thousands of communities available on Facebook alone that you can talk to people, ask their input, give your opinions, and start communications with people. That is the wonderful thing about our day and age, is that we can have these conversations with anyone, anywhere. You just have to find a space and start talking, or start listening. As I've already said, these things live with us, and it's up to us to tend them, to ensure that they're still there for the next generation. Before we wrap things up, I feel we need to address the role that criticism plays in our understanding of these great works of art towards what we've been alluding to towards today. This is an area that I personally feel that we've really become negligent in our role as cultural custodians. And it has a great deal to do with the irreverence that we mentioned earlier, but also criticism. Everyone is a critic these days, and we're entitled to be. That's fine. But in our criticism, in our desire to break apart a work of art and try to fit into the box that we view things in today, we have devalued what we have inherited. Our societal trend towards irreverence and criticism has really hurt us. And it gets worse with each successive generation, because when these ideas were new, when these postmodern viewpoints of the world were new in the 1970s, the people learning them, or the people engaging with these ideas, were still tied to the old world. So they could listen to those ideas and not take everything that they were hearing. But now we're 3 generations removed. And each time that the critics or the people who are trying to poke holes in a work of art because it doesn't meet our current standards do this and pass it on to the next generation, we are getting a damaged copy of what came before us. When what we need to be doing is returning to the source and asking, what does this actually say? Each of us has a duty to find beauty in the world. And the things that have been created, because without beauty, we have nothing but drudgery. And that's a problem, because if your life is just a gray blob of uninteresting things happening, or everything is awful because the world isn't meeting your ideal, I hate to say it, but you're the problem there. Because there's beauty all around us. And going forward with our show, I'm really hoping to be able to focus in on what makes certain ideas beautiful. It is possible to critique something without tearing it down. It is possible to say, I don't think that this line over here or this painting is as original as this one over here. And it's okay. This isn't discrimination for discrimination's sake. It's discrimination in the name of creating a hierarchy for yourself. Because we do this all the time. You discriminate as to who your friends are going to be. You discriminate as to what you're going to wear out in the world just to present yourself to people. We make these decisions regularly. And this can be something that is just on that level. It doesn't have to be an awful thing. You're not excluding someone by saying, I'm not into whatever it is you're into. You can respect it because of the beauty that it speaks to that person. But you don't have to tear it down. And we're really bad about this. I'm bad about this, and I'm trying to be better. If something isn't for you, it's just not for you. That's fine. There are trillions of things in the world. You don't have to find the one thing that speaks to you or the one thing that doesn't speak to you and kick it while you think that you're in a position of superiority. Because someone will do the same to you somewhere down the line. Our singular obsession of tearing down what's come before us has left us jaded and cynical. We feel that we've seen it all before, and in some ways we have, because it's the current year, and we've been around the block more than once. But the thing is, whenever I go for a walk in my neighborhood, there's always something a little different. Maybe it's a flower, or someone finished work on their house and you can see the work that was put into it and you can tell that they wanted it to look good. I live in a very beautiful neighborhood. I just have to say that there. The worst house in the best neighborhood I can afford. And if it's the people that created something that you have a problem with, you can, in fact, look past that. You don't have to take in everything being sold to you by an individual. You don't have to write something off because you disagree with the viewpoints or the life that this other person lived, because they aren't you. But they still have something to teach you. We all have something to teach each other. Only through our suspension of the impulse to destroy can we find the innate beauty inherent within creation itself. In order for us to enact and fulfill our role as cultural custodians, we have to learn to teach and relate what speaks to us to those whom we interact with. It is our duty to ourselves and to each other to learn how to do this, because if we can't, then our entire system collapses into relativism. The fact that we can make decisions as to what is and isn't meaningful to ourselves implies that we have things that we inherently view as more worthy than others. And it's okay to honor and respect that, because we need to in order to make sense of this world. Now, I recognize that I've been spending most of my time talking about the classics here, but that doesn't matter. It can be anything. Just figure out what it is that interests you on a personal level, what speaks to you, and find the words that you need to relate the beauty of whatever that is to the people around you. That is our job in this inherited position of cultural custodian. Not to pass harsh judgment or criticism or hatred against whatever it is we dislike, but to love and care for and tend what matters most to us, so that it can live on well after we're gone. Until next week, this has been In Time, a music history podcast. If you like what you heard today, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button on your podcasting service or this YouTube video or wherever it is you're listening and watching this show. Also, comment and review and, help us grow our digital footprint by sharing this video or this podcast with someone that you think would find value in it. While you're on the internet, check out our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, all at In Time Pod, and head on over to our website at intimepod.com, where you'll find detailed show notes for this and every show. While you're there, please consider making a donation to the program so we can improve our infrastructure to give you the quality program that you deserve. Once again, this has been In Time, a music history podcast. I'm Zachary Singer. We'll see you next week. And remember to stay in time.